Hey everyone, welcome back to Scripture Study with Smithy. So it's Good Friday. Happy Easter to everyone. Just thought I'd do a quick video on what happened today in the New Testament, in the life of Jesus Christ. I won't go into the whole story because it's pretty long, but a couple of things I found interesting as I was just reading the story. Excuse me. One was that they went across into the Mount of Olives. So this is in Luke chapter 22. It says his disciples also followed him. When he was at the place, this is a place where they had been to many times in the book of John, the Gospel of John, it talks about how they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, or the Garden Grove, and on the Mount of Olives quite a few times. They'd resort there. So it's a place that was familiar to them. And there was a brook there, Kidron, or Cedron, or whatever, however they say it. Anyway, and when he was at the place, he said unto them, Pray that ye enter not into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer, and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said unto them, Why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. So just on this, we kind of get caught up in the fact that his disciples are sleeping when he's been away praying and he's suffering this great pain. But let's just talk about what he went through. What he went through, he says, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Okay, there's an angel that's come to visit him while he's in the garden. There appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. Why did the angel come to strengthen him? We're talking about the Son of God here. We're talking about he who has power over all things, right? And there's this angel that's come to strengthen him. Yeah. Anyway, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of ground falling down to the ground. Yeah. So that's interesting. So this is in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he'd taken upon himself the sins of the world, right? The pains and the sicknesses, the afflictions of all people, so that he knows how to succor people. He knows how to, he can understand everything that we have gone through in our lives because he has suffered it here. He understands it. Okay, this is what's going on here in the garden. And it's after this point where he gets, Judas betrays him. Judas brings the chief priests and the Roman soldiers along to the captains of the temple. It says, Jesus said unto the chief priests and the captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, Come ye out as against a thief with swords and staves. Right, so they'd come out with their military attire, thinking that he was going to resist. But he says, When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hands against me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness. In other words, spiritual darkness, right? So here he is. He's just suffered the pains of sicknesses and afflictions of all mankind in the garden, bleeding great drops of blood. It doesn't talk about their reaction to him being covered in blood. So he must have washed himself before this happened, or changed his clothes or something, right? So anyway, they come, they arrest him, they take him to Pilate, or Caiaphas first, I think. Yeah, Caiaphas first. Anyway, he says to, down here, where is it? Anyway, they mocked him, smote him, blindfolded him, struck him in the face, blasphemed against him. And in verse 66 it says, "And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and the chief priests and scribes came together and led him into their council." Okay, so this was really early in the morning, right? That on the Friday morning that he was in the garden. Okay, and then it was daytime they brought him to, so it was early in the morning on the day. "Art thou the Christ? Tell us." And he said unto them, "If I tell you, ye will not believe. And if I also tell you, you will not answer me, nor let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God." And then said they all, "Art thou then the Son of God?" And he said unto them, "Ye say that I am." And they said, "What need we any further witness? For we ourselves have heard of his own mouth." Okay, so in the book of John it talks about, let me skip over there. It talks about how it was Jewish law, right? That he blasphemed Jewish law in saying that he was the Son of God. But the Jews couldn't crucify him. They were forbidden. It was Romans, only the Romans that could do that. So that's why they wanted him to go before Pilate, okay? Because he's blasphemed, he's broken the Jewish law. He deserves to die. That's the punishment for blaspheming like that. Now they wanted to crucify him, but only the Romans could do that. Anyway, interesting what he says with his conversation with Pilate. And Pilate says 3 times, he says, "I found no fault with him." And just to try and keep the Jews happy, he has them, scourged and beaten, and then he goes to, let them free again, and then they're like, no, we want to crucify him, and he's like, "I find no fault with him." And the Jews answered, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." And when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. And he went again unto the judgment hall and said unto Jesus, "Whence art thou?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Okay, so it's interesting stuff. If we back up a little bit, Jesus answered Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. But I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence." Pilate therefore said unto him, "Art thou a king then?" And Jesus answered, "Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice." And that's when Pilate said, "I find no fault with this man." And he says it 3 times. And Jesus said to Pilate further down, so we're in John chapter 19, Jesus answered, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above." Okay, so despite you being the ruler and you being able to crucify me, you had no power against me, except God gave it to you. All right. "Therefore, he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin." Who delivered him to Pilate? The Jews, the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, these people who wanted him dead. They have the greater sin. Yeah, interesting stuff. The last thing I'll mention before we wrap up is when he, where is it? So they're crying out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. And he, bearing his cross, went forth into a place called the place of a skull, which is called in the Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him, and 2 other with him on either side one, and Jesus in the midst. Okay, so you got three, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. And Pilate wrote a title. This is the point that I wanted to make. Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Okay, so Pilate is calling him the King of the Jews here. The Jewish leaders don't like it. It says, this title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city, and it was written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin. Okay, it's written in 3 different languages and put on the cross above him so that everyone could read it in the different languages. And then said the chief priests of the Jews to Pilate, write not the King of the Jews, but that he said, I am King of the Jews. And Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. So the chief priests wanted to, instead of giving him the title of King of the Jews, they wanted Pilate to say that he believed he was the king, right? That I am the King of the Jews. So that was interesting. It's almost as though Pilate believed. He's found no fault with him, and then he's written on this thing his proper title, King of the Jews. Fantastic. But he still sinned in what he did. But the Jews had the greatest sin. Or they wanted him crucified. Anyway, it was interesting to read through John's version of it, because as it goes through, John says that different things that happened and different things that were said fulfilled the scriptures that had prophesied of these events. One instance is the casting of lots. Okay, so they said, therefore, among themselves, let us not rend it, his purple cloak that they put on him, but cast lots for it, whose it shall be, that the scripture might be fulfilled, which saith, they parted my raiment among them, and for my vesture they did cast lots. These things, therefore, the soldiers did. Yeah, so that was interesting, that it was fulfillment of prophecy. Jesus prophesied of his death before. He had told them what kind of death he was going to suffer. But it was prophesied in the Old Testament in many places. So it was fulfillment of prophecy. So on the Good Friday, hope you have a good day. Enjoy your family time and remember the Lord and the suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane in his, what do you call it, shamble of a trial, and the mocking, the beatings, imagine carrying the cross after you've just suffered for the sins of the whole world and you've been scourged with the cat of nine tails. You know, the Passion of the Christ is pretty brutal movie, but it kind of like highlights how ruthless the Romans were in their torture and punishments. And it wasn't an easy thing for what Jesus went through and what he did. And it would have, you know, a normal person would have died, but because he was the Son of God and had power over the flesh, and he had strength from angels to do the work, then he was able to go through with it. So yeah, and the last point, I guess, I haven't read the scripture, but I'll just summarize it, was when they put him on the cross and they the Jews were like, oh, we've got to, you know, it's coming to the end of the day, we need to put these guys in the sepulchre before the Sabbath day. So they go along to break their bones, like they break the thieves' legs so that they die quicker. But when they came to Jesus, he was already dead. He'd already given up the ghost. All right, so they pierced him with a spear through his side or his rib, and out came blood and water, and everyone was amazed. But he was already dead, and yeah. So that was it. That was the events that we call Good Friday. Why is it good? It's good because it's the good news of the gospel, right? The good news is that Jesus came into the world and that he suffered these things that we can overcome sin. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he did that for us. and then on the cross he died, that the resurrection could happen, which we're going to celebrate on Sunday. So, which was the first day of the week, because their Sabbath was the Saturday, right? So, there we go. Fantastic. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that, and just that's my little message for today. And yeah, just give something to think about as you're enjoying those hot crust buns with a nice thick layer of butter. Have a great one. Cheers.